Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Student organizers of March for Our Lives calling for action in the wake of last month's shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Columnist for The Hill, Juan Williams. Julie Pace, Washington Bureau Chief for the Associated Press. And former Trump campaign senior advisor, Jason Miller. Well, Speaker Gingrich, some people are comparing what we saw yesterday to the civil rights movement, to the marches against the Vietnam War. As a historian, do you see some parallels?
I think it'd be fascinating to know who paid for it all. I mean, the left has this wonderful ability to mobilize. So the day after the inaugural, you have the Women's March. People come in buses. Who paid for the buses? People organized the whole process. Who brought the entertainers? The left can't govern, but they can sure demonstrate.
Well, I mean, respectfully, why does it matter who paid for it?
Matters who paid for it because you'd like to know how does somebody build again and again an ability to demonstrate. I think it's useful for the country to know that. It's part of the political process.
Juan?
Wow, I couldn't disagree more. I think the key point here is that you saw people of their own volition turn out in astounding numbers to express their discontent with the easy availability of guns in this country and what it's led to, which is obviously we not only saw the events in Parkland now, I guess about a month ago, Mr. Speaker, but we've been through Columbine, which is coming up on its 20th anniversary, Virginia Tech. So we know that there is a problem with gun violence in schools, and I think it came as an expression of genuine concern about our country and for their own lives to see these young people turn out in these numbers. And if folks help them organize, I don't think that is somehow to discount the sincerity of their feelings. I don't discount
the sincerity of the individuals. I just said it's an interesting phenomenon that the left's great ability is organizing, whether it's the women the day after the inauguration. You go down a whole list of things. But let's talk about guns for a second. I adamantly favor having armed guards in school. I think if we had armed guards in school, you would radically reduce the danger we just saw. I'm willing to have a debate about guns. There are 5 cities in America that have most of the killings in America. 5 cities. All 5 theoretically have gun control. All 5 cities are a disaster. No, by the way, those guns are almost all handguns.
Right. Well, I don't think that's specific, but in terms of, I think this march was sparked by what happened in Parkland, Florida.
Let me I want to just pick up with you before I bring in, I promise I will in a moment, the other two in. You and I are old enough, so is the Speaker, that we were around for the marches in the 60s, the civil rights marches, the Vietnam marches. You wrote a great book on the civil rights movement, Eyes on the Prize. What parallels do you see, and do you think these activists can accomplish what they did?
Well, I can tell you this. I don't make predictions, but I will say that I do see a clear parallel. Just before Easter 1963 in Birmingham, Dr. King had young people without mortgages, no car notes, able to go out in the street and take that risk. And when the nation saw that, saw these young people up against Bull Connor and the dogs and the arrest, guess what? The country became galvanized. They thought, oh my God, these are children in distress. So all arguments about be patient, take your time, this change will come. Suddenly, all those people who are on the line, Chris, suddenly said, this is a matter of conscience to see children in distress, and we now want change in terms of civil rights. Same thing with Vietnam. Same thing, interestingly, with the suffrage movement in this country.
It is Monday, the 26th of March of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, that's right. Okay, what a weekend, huh? Well, Newt Gingrich. It's really rich of Newt Gingrich to, accuse these kids of getting Soros money. That's really what he's talking about. These kids are nothing but a bunch of grifters because that's the extent of the critical thinking of a Newt Gingrich. I think it's particularly rich when he claims that the left cannot govern, but they sure do know how to protest. Now, does he think that we are that dumb? Is he just being droll when he says that, how is it that they're able to organize so fast? The day after the inauguration, they had the Women's March. How were they able to organize that fast? Well, because the Women's March started being organized right after the election, which was in November, and the inauguration wasn't till towards the end of January. That's a long time to organize. How were these kids able to organize so quickly? Well, there's been a bit of time since they were mowed down by an AR-15 and, when they had their march. And there's going to be another one, too, in April. So, Newt Gingrich, shut up and get the hell out of here. Okay. Well, I should mention what's on the menu for today because the weekend is always rich with news, and to curate a Monday is a little tough because there's news on Friday that has become old by today. So it's hard. It really is hard. But on the rest of the menu today, a new study reveals the job market punishes women who had great grades in college. Yeah, that's right. Where an average guy who didn't have good grades gets promoted over and over and over. The California court system paid out over $500,000 to resolve sexual harassment suits against judges and other court staff. Well, that's nice. And a nervous RNC is forced to fend off an inspiring emergency room doctor running in a district that Trump won by 20 points. The blue wave just keeps rolling on. And after the break, we'll move to the chef's table where an Alaska town, threatened by climate change for decades, finally gets federal funding to relocate. And China just released a jailed Tibetan blogger after 3 years of hard labor and torture. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll see on the rightish, of course, the chat room link. And if you have any questions, requests, or whatnot, contact us there. Kelly Lincoln, our rowing girl, does monitor that quite diligently. And to the leftish, of course, are the donate contribute buttons. And we are unable to do this without you. So thank you for your generosity. Podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, etc., and I'm still waiting for iTunes to review my show. So hopefully, keep fingers crossed, they'll do that soon, or they'll just do it. And music. on the show is provided by Frances Livings, and she is a fantastic and beautiful ingenue down in Southern California and performs all over the Southland. So if you happen to be in town, check out her shows. And there are links at my show notes and links diary that I put up every day about 10 minutes before showtime. And you can find links to her work there, as well as links to, what we have going in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy today. Well, I had a bit of a kerfuffle over the weekend. I don't usually get muted or kicked out of a conversation, though I don't know what it is that drives people to go after these kids that just don't want to be shot at anymore. It just amazes me. So between my brother's Route 91 survivor support page and then just, people out in the regular world that follow me or come across me, I just had a bit of a conversation between my brother's group and others who decided that they just think it's too dangerous for those kids to go out there and protest. So someone who had purported to be an educator, I always love that because I come from an academic. Well, my dad is as you know, a fairly renowned historian, and I endeavored into a bit of academe and at least educating, on various levels. And so I have a bit of experience in it. And also, I was a kid. And I remember being a kid, I got to tell you, probably junior high was when the activism began. But I remember in 1965, when I was 10 years old, thinking, wow, is this war going to be going on when I get old enough to have to go? Because they were drafting people then. And they drafted people right up until I was a senior in high school. My senior class was the last ones to get lottery numbers and then be drafted. And fortunately, there was a couple of things that probably would have precluded me from going. Number one, the sports injuries I'd already sustained. But I was fortunate I had a high enough lottery number. They were only taking, I think, the first 150, 130, whatever. And I was way up in the 200s. But friends of mine did go to Vietnam and died there. Sort of like when Carrie said, how's it feel to be the last man left alive in a illegal war? Well, yeah. So I experienced that. And as kids, we went into the streets. They didn't call it a student movement for nothing. And then even before that, when 8 to 18-year-olds marched, in the South and were brutally attacked. Now, of course, one could say, why would anyone put children in harm's way? And my retort might be, well, why are those children's lives endangered to begin with? Shouldn't we be attending to those who would attack the kids? So there were sister marches all over the country, and I particularly loved the photos of the gun nuts who thought that it would be appropriate to come out and display military-grade weaponry that mowed down these kids in their high school as some sort of, reminder. It is just cruel beyond measure. And then the one picture of somewhere in Utah where a woman has her kid. Now, I just love it. Why would you bring kids to do all of this? But they got a kid up on top of a tank. Well, an armored assault vehicle with a top turret. And I think that's a .50 caliber on the top. And she's got a bullhorn telling people, I've got the bigger gun and you better shut up. Now, there's been a lot of talk that we ought to impose the death penalty now on drug dealers, pushers, the suppliers of this addiction that is just roiling across our country. And I think that maybe I might be in favor of the death penalty if it applied to gun dealers, suppliers, and those responsible for a roiling addiction across our country, because there's no other way to describe it. It is an addiction to guns. Beyond all reasonable thinking, people have to have a gun. And they're not only going to have a gun, they're going to make sure everybody knows that they have a gun. And anybody who says you can't have a gun, well, have you ever discussed, with a tobacco user? Maybe there's too many tobacco users out there. I don't know. I've only experienced close hand heroin addiction a couple of times. So talking to those people, I don't have as much experience. But an addiction is an addiction, and it makes people irritable. And if you remind people that they're going to have to give up their addiction, they get really mad. Really mad. Because it doesn't apply to them. Oh, no, I'm not that kind. I'm different. Growing up, I used to think that people should just live their lives the way they wanted to. And as I got older, I realized people's behavior really has an impact on their neighbors. So maybe we should live our lives to the fullest extent that we can, as long as we don't offend and, step on our neighbor's space. Be a good neighbor. And then I found out, I believe that, drugs, for instance. Everybody should be able to take drugs. It's an individual liberty. And then I found out certain compounds made people, I don't know any other term for it, crazy. Because they did crazy things. They would break into homes so that they can continue getting whatever it is that made them crazy. So I realized that, maybe not everybody should have drugs. Because there's certain people that can handle it and there's certain people that can't. And then if you're one of those that says, I can handle it, I should be able to, doesn't take into account that maybe these rules should apply to all, even those that can handle it. Now with guns, maybe you should be able to be licensed. Or with cars, you should be licensed. Show a proficiency. I don't know how you show a proficiency in drugs, but for the better of the whole, sometimes we who can handle it have to give up something so that the whole of the community can survive. And it's the same with these guns. People are addicted to guns. And I'm only kidding about the death penalty. I don't believe in it in any capacity. But maybe we should see if that is a deterrent effect upon this particular group of people. Maybe we should. All right, well, I've just gone on and on and on. We should get on with what we have curated for you today. So, the job market punishes women with good grades. How dare you be successful and accomplished? Okay, this is by Maureen Casana out of Alternate. In a study titled Punishing Women for Being Smart, the website Inside Higher Education showed that women with higher grades in college aren't given the same level of preference, responses, and attention that their male peers get. The gender disparity is most evident in interview calls, according to the study, as male graduates received offers to discuss job opportunities 2 times more than female graduates. The lead researcher, assistant professor of sociology, Natasha Quinlan of Ohio State University, I guess that means the Ohio State University, conducted an audit in which she sent 2,100 job applications for different roles. According to Inside Higher Ed, Quadlin created a differentiated pool of applicants based on their gender, grades, and the majors they studied in college. Well, she found out several things. For one, male graduates' grades were not as consequential in scoring job market attention as she expected them to be. Secondly, women applicants seemed to be punished for having impressive graduate grades. In fact, she noted that women stood more of a chance to hear back from job interviews if they had moderate grades. Stop being so smart, you be. where everybody knows a smart woman is going to turn out to be a B, and we can't handle that. Now, a guy without good grades, well, of course, because I got to tell you, a lot of those middle managers didn't have very good grades too. And what were their majors? Was it truly something academic? Now, come on. Business classes? I mean, take math. You know? I mean, it's accounting, right? Or, and then take behavioral sciences. Okay? I mean, business? Okay. Countless studies have confirmed that women tend to face much more emotionally taxing and less financially rewarding conditions in various professional fields. Try being a scientist. Try being an architect. Try being an engineer. Etc., etc., etc. Research shows that women are expected to wear makeup in order to look competent. Okay. Of course, there are a lot of guys now dyeing their hair and getting a little bit of Botox to take the wrinkles away because they think, oh, I have to look youthful and vital, instead of being vital and, vigorous. Yep. Look it. Don't be it. That's the problem. Academic research shows that female professors are expected to field special requests from entitled students and carry more workload compared to their male peers. Well, everybody knows that women are Wonder Women, especially when they become professional. Otherwise, how else would they be able to handle stuff? Come on. And I got to tell you, it's kind of like what Obama had to go through, too. He couldn't just be, a good president. No. He had to be the best there ever was. And even that wasn't good enough. A study on open source project applications showed that women's acceptance rates only goes up if they are not identified as female. Makes you wonder how come all those women novelists had to go by a nom de plume back in the day in which everybody thought they were a guy. The stereotypes revealed in Quadlin's study are distressing, but they confirm the popular suspicion that the job market is still very much skewed in favor of men. You mean, it still is and always has been, and boy, is it hard to get that entrenchment out of place. All right, next offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is out of the LA Times by Maura Dolan. Now, the California court system paid more than $500,000 over 7 years to resolve sexual harassment complaints against judges and staff. In a response to a public records request, the Judicial Council, the rulemaking body for the court system, said it paid almost $300,000 to resolve 3 sexual harassment complaints against judges, and then another $225,000 to settle 2 lawsuits against court staff. I should break in here and mention that I somehow contracted a cold over the weekend, and I'm a little stuffy and I'm sniffling. I got to stop that. Now, in addition, the council reported spending almost $80,000 since 2010 for outside attorney investigators to look into sexual harassment allegations or other complaints against 5 judges. Now, the council is claiming attorney-client privilege and a court rule so that they don't have to reveal the names of any of the courts, the judges, or employees involved in these sexual harassment cases. And so the Judicial Council said that it was contacting the courts and individuals it represented to determine whether they would waive their privilege to allow the legal records to be released. Now, just in contrast, there is a bicameral system in California, the Assembly and the Senate. And both of those bodies had their own sexual harassment issues. And they just last month, disclosed 18 cases of sexual harassment that involved lawmakers and staff, and they identified the names of those legislators, and those legislators stepped down in most cases. But the legislative records released in response to a separate public records request disclosed details about resolved cases where allegations were determined to be well-founded. So, but not for the courts. They don't want you to know who's involved, even though they may have been retired. Well, they want to go off into the sunset, I suppose. One of the settlements paid... county courts can resolve such cases themselves without reporting to statewide council, and one of those settlements paid by the Judicial Council stemmed from a lawsuit against a former Tulare County Superior Court judge, Valeriano Sacedo, who he was ordered removed from the bench in late 2015 for inappropriate behavior with his court clerk who sued him. Okay, so apparently he'd made unwanted sexual overtures, and she really didn't like it, and who would blame her? The Council on Judicial Performance, the watchdog agency for judges, called for Sacedo's removal after finding that he pressed his clerk to be his special friend, gave her $26,000 in gifts and cash, and then lied about his behavior to investigators. And it looks like they paid another $100,000 to settle a federal lawsuit against Lassen County Superior Court Judge Tony Mallory. He had been charged with screaming and yelling at female employees and hugging a defendant in open court. Neither Mallory nor the court admitted wrongdoing in the settlement. And in December, court officials confirmed the presiding Justice Conrad Rushing of the San Jose-based Court of Appeals faced allegations of bigotry, sexual harassment, and discrimination against women when he retired last year. Up here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is an article out of Share Blue Media by Matthew Chapman. Now, this is important and why we should really ascribe to the Dean strategy, the 50-state strategy, but increase it to, everything has to be contested, even down to dog catcher, because the more money that the other side has to throw at races that they think that they've always had a lock on, the better, right? The better for us. Well, the GOP suffered a humiliating blow this month when Democratic Marine vet Connor Lamb won the special election in Pennsylvania's 18th congressional district, flipping a red seat to blue, in a district that Trump carried by 20 points. And let's remember, he not only did that, but that has been deemed an illegal gerrymander in the district he's in. And that was one of the reasons why Trump won it by 20 points. And in spite of that, he still won. And he'll be running in a different district just in a few months, actually. Well, Lamb's victory showed that even the reddest of seats are up for grabs. And now Republicans are worried about another special election that's upcoming in Arizona's 8th congressional. So worried that the RNC has taken out nearly $280,000 in canvassing. Wow. Now, the 8th district, which includes the northwest suburbs of Phoenix, was vacated by disgraced Rep. Trent Franks. Amid revelations, he offered $5 million to a female staffer to impregnate her. Well, Trump carried the district by 20 points, but the RNC appears to be worried that the seat is not as safe as they thought. Now, the Democrats have nominated Hero Tibetan, a local emergency room physician, for the seat. The GOP narrowly managed to avoid nominating a candidate who himself is embroiled in a sex scandal, although their ultimate nominee, former State Senator Debbie Lesko, has faced accusations of violating campaign finance law. Now, for the time being, polls show that the race is not close, that the Republican right now holds a commanding lead. But by the fact that the RNC is investing in almost $300,000 in canvassing means that they're worried, big time. Now, despite Tibetan being a first-time candidate, she had more cash on hand than does her opponent. That's another sign that the enthusiasm was with the Democratic candidate. Both Lamb was behind in his race, as well as Doug Jones, who managed to make that stunning victory against child molester Roy Moore in Alabama. Both of them were way behind. The overall electoral environment is tilted toward Democrats, with polls showing voters overwhelmingly favoring Democratic control of the House and a series of victories on the local level. So if ever this district became competitive, it would be now. And all over the country, Republicans have gotten the message loud and clear. No seat is safe anymore. Okay, let's get to our break, and we'll come back and go through the weather, and then finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, first time's the charm. When playwright Corey Finley finished writing his first screenplay, he wasn't sure he had a movie on his hands. However, when he shopped it around, June Pictures picked it up and tapped Finley to direct his own work based on the strength of the script. That's a directing debut for his feature film debut. After the movie premiered at Sundance, Comcast Focus Features bought it, distributed it, and now we have Thoroughbred, starring Olivia Cooke and Anna Taylor-Joy as two rich high school young women, one who cannot feel any emotion while trying to be good, and the other who is being overwhelmed with her feelings and just needs a nudge to go bad. Together, they do not do good things for each other. Finley and his editor Louise Ford do good things for us, as they execute a bold stylistic choice that is nothing less than a writer-director with a firm knowledge of how he wants his work to sound. This is a movie of negative space, where lines sit like islands in seas of stillness. With worse people, such a choice could be a recipe for a dull, plodding flick. However, Cooke, Taylor-Joy, Ford, Finley, and company are so good that instead this film feels tight and tense. Adding to the tension is the sound design. All the dialogue is so live and present, it's as if the characters are speaking next to you, creating an unnerving intimacy. Also, first-time feature film composer Eric Friedlander produces a shockingly unique score with cello and prepared piano that moans, clicks, and screeches as Finley and Ford weave it into the sinews of the action. This is also a movie of long takes, and you'd be tempted to say they betray Finley's theater background, but they're filmically strong, creating an abstract cinematic claustrophobia as if the characters are trapped in these moments of their lives, nothing to do but to let them happen, and we're trapped there with them. With a breakout performance by Cooke and a worthy final turn by taken before his time Anton Yelchin, Thoroughbreds has the makings of a cult classic. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Got a minute? There's a well-known conspiracy of ravens, that's what you call a group of ravens, that likes to hang out near a zoo in the Austrian Alps. Every day, these ravens conspire to steal the food that's set out for the wild boars there.
So we had a really great opportunity to really watch those individuals daily.
University of Vienna cognitive biologist Markus Buchle. He spends lots of time ignoring the zoo animals and watching the ravens.
What we found is that every time they come, they do those food calls, which are very typical for the ravens when they are close to potentially dangerous food resources.
The ravens use these calls to recruit their buddies to show up, both to reduce potential dangers from predators and to overpower dominant ravens who might be trying to hoard all the food for themselves. But Buchla and his colleagues began to suspect the calls revealed other information.
So we had the feeling we could say this is a juvenile, this is a sub-adult, and this is most probably an adult just by listening to the calls.
If the researchers could use the calls to distinguish among ravens, then perhaps the ravens themselves could do so too. So Buchla and his team recorded the calls of around 100 known individuals, all of which had been previously cataloged by weight, age, and sex, and were identifiable by colored leg bands. The researchers combined that data with the acoustic properties of their calls and dumped everything into a computer program. And as they suspected, there were differences in the frequency, duration, and amplitude of the calls that could sort the ravens according to sex and age. The results were published in the journal Frontiers in Zoology.
So the benefit is, and especially for birds like ravens who travel long distances every day, that whenever you encounter a new individual or listen to a new individual, you already are able to categorize one of the birds just based on their calls. So this really helps you to assess whether you're going to be in an aggressive situation or whether you're going to be the most dominant individual just by listening to the calls.
To be clear, the researchers showed that they could categorize ravens according to their calls, not that ravens actually do so. That's what Buchla and his team are working on now. Still, the study shows that while a call can primarily refer to some external object like food, it can also transmit additional social information. And since these sorts of calls are thought of as the precursors for language, this study might shed light on how a simple system for communication can evolve into something far more complex, such as me talking to you right now. Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1854. That was the day that the founders of what became the Republican Party met in Ripon, Wisconsin. The idea was to form a new party, opposed to the Southern labor system based on slavery. That July, the Republicans held their first convention in Michigan. Their motto became free soil, free labor, free men. But as historian Eric Foner has explained, proclaiming the superiority of free labor was easy. Implementing that vision proved more troublesome. Women and free black residents living in the North often found it difficult, if not impossible, to find safe, good-paying jobs in the so-called free labor system. 2 years after the new party was founded, Republicans ran their first presidential candidate, John C. Fremont. Fremont was a military man, explorer, and mapmaker of the American West. He carried 11 northern states, but failed to win the presidency. The next election, Republicans nominated Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln won 18 northern states, and for the first time, a Republican sat in the White House. With the victory of a free labor candidate, the country stood on the brink of civil war. The question of slave labor would be settled on the battlefield. In his first address to Congress, President Lincoln declared, "Labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could have never existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital and deserves much the higher consideration." Given the thoughts of the first Republican president, could you imagine a leader in the Republican Party making such a statement today?
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Monday, March 26, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. Courts in Thailand have sent a clear message to labor activists. Do not investigate the working conditions of migrants in the country. After a series of court hearings and appeals, the courts have ruled that Andy Hall, a British Labour researcher, is guilty of damaging the reputation of a pineapple production company called Natural Fruit. Mr. Hall has been fined the equivalent of 260,000 euros, about $323,000 US. The court has also ordered Mr. Hall to pay the expenses of the company's lawyer. The case originally relates to a report Mr. Hall prepared for a Finnish NGO called Finnwatch in early 2013. The report focused on how migrant workers, mainly from nearby Myanmar, were being treated at the pineapple processing plant. Further charges were laid after Mr. Hall gave an interview to Al Jazeera television about the workers. I interviewed Mr. Hall in 2015 as he was facing fines and imprisonment for the work he was doing.
The factory was, when I did the research, the workers suggested to me that the factory was about 70% migrant workers from Myanmar, which is the neighboring country with Thailand that was under military dictatorship for almost 6 decades, the country where Aung San Suu Kyi is the main democracy icon there. So these workers said to me that they faced a lot of challenges in the factory, including forced labor, forced overtime. They said there was child labor in the factory. They said they weren't paid the minimum wage, and that living and working in the factory was not a pleasant experience. That's what they told me. I simply noted that, and I sent it on to Finnwatch, who then wrote their own report and published that report. And it's that report over which I'm being prosecuted.
Aren't you scared?
If I was Thai or if I was a Myanmar person doing this kind of work, I think there's a high likelihood that I will be dead already, you know. And I think that for me to be able to do this kind of thing as somebody with a good network, even with the white skin, you know, is the way it works in this kind of in this part of the world. You know, I can really make a difference and make a change. And that's one of the reasons why I continue to do that, to speak up for people like Myanmar workers who don't have any voice. And I think it's my duty to do that as someone who can speak out, you know, a duty as a citizen of the world. I think that's very important. But secondly, I believe that what I did was right. And when you get prosecuted using the criminal law, which is the most severe of societal sanction against an individual, you feel that you have to prove yourself, you know. And I feel very confident that what I did was right. I didn't do anything wrong. I was merely doing according to my human rights, and I was merely doing something to help other people. I work with many, many companies in Thailand every day. The companies don't behave like this. This is a company which has a very poor way of thinking about researchers, about activists, about NGOs, want to prove to people that they shouldn't do this kind of thing. And I also believe that through fighting, I will bring more and more attention to the severe conditions of migrant workers who continue to live in Thailand. We're talking about, you know, more than 10% of the workforce who are essentially a crucial part of the Thai economy and a crucial part of the world economy. They're involved in all this food export, this intensive labor that's going into the food export, which is the food that's ending up on our shelves. And I think that as a citizen of the world, I have a duty to be supporting them on these kind of things. I mean, unfortunately, in this kind of world, in this kind of area of the world, unionization is incredibly limited. Collective bargaining is incredibly limited. We have only about 1% of the workforce in Thailand that forms unions, and migrant workers are completely outside of that whole system. So it really does mean that people like myself, researchers, activists, have a crucial role to play in trying to speak up for workers, but in also, in the long term, trying to empower them to form their own unions, to collectively bargain, and to take control of their own lives, which is not the case at the moment.
What can labor organizations and their members do to help the migrant workers in Thailand?
What is most important is for unions, international, global union federations, national unions, to be helping workers and worker leaders in Thailand to organize, to collectively bargain, teaching them about their rights and teaching them how to organize, to fight for their rights in solidarity and together. What we desperately need and what the migrants desperately need is unions to come and organize them and teach them how to take their power in their own life and how to bargain with employers to improve their conditions.
Mr. Hall is currently in Nepal. And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Well, thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. I'll try to get through this. I'm suffering this cold, and darn it. Also, I want to thank you. There's been some notifications on social media that today is my birthday, and indeed it is. I'm turning 63. And I look at it as a benchmark because if I can get through this year, I can say that I've lived longer than Hemingway. And then the next big benchmark will be Henry Miller. So if I can live as long as Henry Miller, I might have something going for me there, won't I? Okay, well, now that we are at the chef's table, we like to begin with the weather from around the world. And in that, we like to begin along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America. It is currently 27 degrees. Woohoo! And we expect to be a tad warmer than we were yesterday. We're going to go to a high of about 56. Winds will be light and variable. Right now, they are out of the south-southwest about 3 miles per hour. No precipitation expected today, though, over the weekend. And this may be the reason I caught a cold, is that we were up around the 60s during the daytime, afternoon or so, and then would plummet down into the low 30s, upper 20s, and we had rain and snow and ice and sleet. So we'll have the attendant cold overnight, but without the major precipitation. So we'll see. And that's still, I think the temperature swing is one that's not conducive to, health. Because warm and then cold, warm and then cold. Ouch. Let's see here. Still no data on air quality. I'm going to have to get a hold of Weather Underground and ask, what the heck? Tell those people to turn on their air quality data gatherer. Pressure is holding steady at 30.34 inches. Visibility is about 9 miles. And humidity is 85%. Okay. Well, that's how it is here in Southern Oregon. Well, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase, and these people planted these purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. Okay. Oh, I forgot to say thank you for the birthday wishes. I mentioned it was my birthday, and it's showing up on social media, and people reminded me it was my birthday, so thank you for that. Much appreciated. Okay, London is 53 and sunny. Paris is 56 and sunny. Rome is 57 and partly cloudy. Kiev, 41, mostly cloudy. Kabul, 65 and fair. Hong Kong, 67 and partly cloudy. Tokyo, 55 and clear. Sydney, Australia, 63 and clear. San Francisco, California, 42 degrees and sunny. And New York is 41 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny as all hell. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase, and these people planted these purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people live around the world. First up here at the chef's table in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is an Alaska town, the village of Nutuk. Nutuk has been trying to relocate to safer ground for decades, and looks like they're finally able to. They've secured more than $15 million in funding to relocate households to safer ground inland. The funding is part of a $1.3 trillion spending bill that was signed on Friday. The amount, however, is still a fraction of what's required to relocate the whole village. Located along the banks of the Ninglik River, the land on which the community of roughly 350 people live has been eroding away since the late 50s. They've been trying to relocate since 94, but securing funding has remained elusive, and the effects of climate change, which are Sea level rises, stronger storms, and melting permafrost have made the situation increasingly urgent, especially with the permafrost melting, because then you got methane and methane explosions. You don't like that. Excuse my my stuffed nose. I'll try to get through this, okay? Newtuck is currently losing about 70 feet of land every year due to coastal erosion. The village began planning their new community in 2000. It would be located in Murtavik, roughly 9 miles away. Few families, however, have made the move. A number of obstacles complicate the move. Government agencies that provide funding for housing won't build in areas that don't have infrastructure. And agencies that fund infrastructure won't build where there are no homes. That's a catch-22, isn't it? Jesus. Now, the money awarded under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program will put $1.7 million toward buying out 7 households. This would reportedly help more than 50 people move to the new village. Okay. Now, Alaska is not the only state facing this issue. Indigenous communities in Washington State and Louisiana have also been working over the years to relocate to higher ground. Both have secured funding to make the move. Most recently, on March 20th, it was reported that the state of Louisiana had purchased $11.7 million plot of land to relocate the Isle of Deschanel community. And that was part of a larger $48 million grant awarded to the community in 2016. Let's see, under President Obama, agencies that agreed to begin figuring out how to help these communities have made the difficult choice to relocate in the face of mounting climate change impacts. But under the Trump administration, these plans were never put in action.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Okay, finishing up here at the chef's table, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Well, China released a Tibetan blogger. Drukar Gyal spent just a little more than 3 years in prison for a blog post, as China tightens restrictions on freedom of expression. Joshua Eaton from Think Progress penned this piece. The Chinese government released prominent Tibetan blogger Drukar Gyal, better known by his pen name Shok Chang, late Tuesday, after 3 years in prison and likely torture for his political writing. Gyal's arrest and sentence reflect a tightening of restrictions that have been felt especially hard in the disputed ethnic minority regions of Tibet and Xinjiang. Okay, that's because the Chinese fear separatism along those areas. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a lot of prominent Tibetan writer Sarang Wozer, who's based in Beijing, greeted the photo of Gyal with relief on Thursday of his release. I can't but help think of Homer's ethic, she wrote. To praise your heroic return, to rejoice at the fact that you're seeing the sun that lights the earth again, and to offer you a ceremonial scarf and flowers. So there is a picture of Drukar with, fellow writer Therang Wok. And they're photographed on his release, and folks across China are rejoicing in that. Of course, that rejoicing may and could result in their own arrest. The authorities in China disappeared Gyal on March 19th of 2015 after he wrote a blog post about the deployment of security forces in the city of Repkong. Located in the disputed part of the Qinghai province, Gyal had written about other sensitive issues in the past, including the conditions facing Tibetan nomads, whom China has attempted to forcibly settle in government housing. Well, just have them move from apartment to apartment. I don't know. Okay. Now, the restrictions on intellectuals are just one element of a village-by-village system of control China has been perfecting in Tibetan areas before deploying it to other test spots across the country. Not everyone in Tibet feels that repression on a day-to-day basis, especially since the levers of control are more subtle there than in Xinjiang, another disputed area in northwest China that's home to the Uyghur ethnic group. But the Communist Party limits social and intellectual life to narrow lanes. Stay within them, and it may be possible to flourish, swerve, and the hammer falls. China is designed to make sure you have a very good life if you stay on the right side of the line. Now, in a written defense released after his conviction, Gyal appealed to the Chinese Constitution's protections of freedom of expression, but restrictions on religion and speech in China are enforced through unofficial Communist Party mechanisms rather than formal laws, meaning they bounce your head against the pavement. Okay. Well, he says he will never stop writing. He's holding a pen in his hands right now, he said, but with his pen he is challenging the weapons and the violence of the Chinese state. Well, let's hope that he stays free and might even be able to travel outside the country. That would be grand, wouldn't it? Okay, well, we're going to have to finish up for today, and we'll be back here tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays, and stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day. There's going to be some breaking news. If by chance Mueller gets fired, we will break in and follow that live and have a panel discussion. And so stay tuned for that. We're prepared to break in live anytime that may happen. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio, and we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 mon jardin d'hiver.